Hi, welcome again. I'm so happy that you're here. We're going to get started because I know some people are on the lunch break. And we're going to go through the wheel of samsara today. It could be the samskaras too, where some scars are in it. So the wheel of samsara is really a fantastic model to think about when we are obsessing with the mind and we are so stuck with the intellectual part of ourselves. It's easy to have that dominating in our lives. I think most people in the Western world are brought up being overly dominated by the mind, and finding a bit more balance is what we all long for. Like there's this inner longing, inner unease. Well, longing is not the same as unease, but there's an inner longing to be more in balance, for this harmony, for this inner peace, for this satisfaction that is just there. It's not needed to do things to be satisfied. It's not needed to be fulfilled by external means to be content and happy. We just long for that state because that is our natural state. So, but while we are so dominated by mind, let's see, we have a chat. Okay, great. So, while we are dominated by the mind, there's not really that space to come into center, and I feel that this model. So I mean, it's not easy just to let the mind go. It's not that easy. Sometimes it is. Sometimes we have tools and perhaps activities that we do to come into center. But sometimes we have to go through the mind to be able to let the mind go. And that is where this model comes in. I feel it's so well suited for the thinking mind. To understand itself and to be able to let itself go, to let itself off the hook a little bit, if you will, and to come past, through, beyond the mind. I'm going to share a picture. Let's see, screen share. And we're just going to go through it. I think that's the easiest. Can you see? Hang on. Oh, I clicked the wrong button and I wanted to install the software, but I think we are on. Can you see that now? Yeah, I think you can. So this is an ancient model that is dating back from at least a couple of thousand years before Christ. It's from the Indus Valley. It's what has been seeded and used and applied in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, yogic philosophy, in different philosophical systems, and yeah, it's been adapted and explained in many different ways. But I'm going to share my way, which is the way that has been very useful for me. So when we talk about the wheel of suffering and the wheel of samsara, it is really that wheel, the process, a cycle that is inherent in humanity, in humans as we are born, to create this loop. It's a loop that reinforces karma. It's a loop that reinforces misinterpretation of life, of experience, and creating suffering for us. It's creating like pain in everyday life. It's creating tension in relationships. It's creating that inner feeling of not being completely fulfilled, not completely there. in unconditional love and presence and beingness. So yeah, this model begins with explaining how we function in a situation. So you could say that stimuli, sensory input and information reaches us. We perceive it somehow, and a sensation is born. So we perceive it through our senses and have a sensation. So the senses are sight, hearing, taste, feeling, those senses. So the sensation arises and gives birth to a feeling. The feeling can be of pain, of fear, it could be pleasure, joy, happiness, loneliness, whatever feeling, all the feelings. And what happens in our human genome is that we attach ourselves to pleasurable experiences, pleasurable feelings, and we avoid painful feelings and painful experiences. So attachment or avoiding. So attachment is called raga in Sanskrit, and avoiding is dvesha. So if we have a feeling that is painful, say our knee begins to hurt, we move the body, when we move the legs so the knee won't hurt anymore. That is quite healthy avoidance of pain, that we remove ourselves from the painful situation. But when it comes to emotions, we also avoid being in pain. Say if we feel lonely, we do other things to distract ourselves from feeling that feeling. When in fact it's quite healthy to allow yourself to feel whatever emotions arises. So this is where we use distractions. We scroll through our phones instead of being empty while waiting, or we scroll through other distractions. We eat sweets, candy, bring out something to numb ourselves with. Could be alcohol or substances too. But even these small distractions is an effect of this function. Let's say it's a mental function or inner psychological function to avoid pain. An attachment to pleasure can come into expression when we have such a beautiful moment. We, let's say we sit and enjoy a meal, it's sunny, it's a beautiful day, it hasn't been that great for a long time, and we're just so happy that the situation is so wonderful. That's when this function comes into play as well. We try to extend it. We tell it to others, we take photos, we think about it afterwards. And the same goes for vacations. If we look forward to a vacation, we want to extend and prolong that happiness that we are going to feel in that future. So we fantasize about it, we think about it, we talk about how wonderful it's going to be. And then after vacation, we think about how wonderful it was. And we show photos, we look at pictures, and we prolong that period where we were really happy. So it's really, we're trying to grasp and hold on to the happiness. Whereas true happiness doesn't come from what is outside, it comes from being completely present. So let's hope that in that vacation, we were really present and just allowing ourselves to be in that environment, completely present, and a lot happier than you would have been thinking about all the external objects around it. Perhaps having to take a lot of photos to show how amazing it is instead of just enjoying how amazing it is. Something happens when we loosen the grip to this attachment to prolong satisfaction. When we can just let it be, not extend it, grasp it, hold on to it, trying, and we can just let that go and just be in this beautiful moment, be with that person or this surrounding and just be there. I promise you, it opens a door that is magnifying the happiness that you feel. And it can also mean that you are even equally happy being on the parking lot, having to wait to leave that beautiful park or whatever it could be. So you can, if you come into that presence, the happiness is just tenfold, thousandfold. So these attachment and avoiding functions are really interesting to begin to notice in one's life. Moving on, when we experience something, we have a part of us has a need to create a story about that situation and ourselves. So stories are me, myself, and I, asmita in Sanskrit. It's really the ego maker. This is the function in us that our mind just create this narration, stories, story after story after story about what we experience. So we are in a situation, we experience something, and instantly there's a thought process, a thought storyline that goes something about, I am experiencing this. My knee is hurting, or that person did that to me, or that person has that kind of car and I just have this car. We relate to every single input, sensory experience in a way that separates ourselves from the experience. And this is really important because when we separate ourselves from the experience, we are no longer one with all. And you know that one with all is all that we are. So in this step, we create the false sense of self, the ego self, that is very human and very natural to exist in this conditioned dimension that we're in as humans. But it's not all that we are. And we grow up thinking that is all that we are. And that part of us needs to be fed with more stories. And it needs to be validated. So we repeat situations that created those stories. And it needs to be told about for ourselves and others so that it still exists. If we don't talk about that part as being a valid part of us, it doesn't exist anymore, right? So these stories of me, myself, and I are almost 100% of our thoughts. I can't claim that it's 100%, but it's almost every single thought is a story about me, myself, and I. Just listen and see if those words appear. Jag, mig och mitt in Swedish. We have a lot of Swedes here. So it's also to become observant of those thoughts and to let those thoughts go. Not to place so much value in those stories. And see them for what they are. They are not untruth. They are not bad. They are not discouraged. They are not unwanted. They are just a part that gives you a clue to what is happening within you. I'll just check this there in the chat. Yeah, in truth, there is no me. That's just weird. Was I gonna say more about that? Yeah, we are to look at the separation a little bit more, because in essence, we are all one. We are all the same, the very, very same consciousness expressed everywhere, 100% in you, 100% in me. There's no little part of me that is part of all, God, universe, source. It's not a little thread that I have connecting me to that external source. It's 100% of me, and 100% of you is all. So the separation happens. You can probably explain this in many other philosophies and ways, but in this model, separation happens when we experience something and we are not the experience. So say, I'd like to take the knee for an example. We just look a little bit more in detail on this process. So the pain arises, okay? The pain arises in the knee, and then we create a story about it. My knee is hurting. So there we separate ourselves. It's the knee, it is my knee that's hurting. It is I that have an experience. I am not, we are not joined. So really all these stories build an identity that is not true. An identity, a sense of identity that is not your truest essence. It's the stories that goes also, I am a teacher, I am an engineer, I am someone who is always betrayed, I am someone who had a difficult childhood, I am the sick one, I am the one with a bad back, I am blah, 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 blah. All those roles, titles, experiences, descriptions, they will say, I am that, I am that, I am that, I am that. That build that false sense of identity, the false identity, the ego identity, the ego self. By the way. And then we come to abhinivesha, which is the fear of letting go. And the fear of letting go, we come to this place in many different ways. It's an inherent fear of letting go of control, of what we know, because we don't know what's behind. And also that identity, we don't know what's beyond because we can't describe it yet. We can only experience it once we have let go. And the letting go process is, it's full of layers. But really the core of the fear of letting go is the fear of letting go of the identity. So we keep repeating situations for ourselves. We keep repeating stories. We keep identifying through reacting to other people so that story is reimbursed and reinforced. So we build this identity consciously and unconsciously, very much unconsciously. So the fear of letting go is really the fear of losing a part of ourselves. And that can also be seen, let's check the time, yeah. That can also be seen in people at the end of life, the fear of letting go. A person that is satisfied, fulfilled, in connection with her deepest truth, her deepest essence, have no problem letting go of this physical life. Have no problem of letting go of the identity that this life created. and she dies easily, naturally, peacefully. Whereas a person that has a strong ego self, meaning someone that has been fulfilled with status work perhaps, or fulfilled through the external materialistic lifestyle perhaps, but in essence you can have that and be deeply enlightened too, but in essence being really identified through the internal stories about me, myself, and I. When that is dominant, that person will have difficulty dying at the end of life. There will be a struggle, there will be gripping to life and anger and probably depression. It's not an easy process for someone that is absorbed with the ego self. And I don't mean someone that's egotistical, you know this now from listening to this story, but it's someone that is identifying the entirety of himself through the false sense of self, through the ego self, the stories about me, myself, and I, that is separated from God, separated from source, separated from the one that you truly are. So this separation is not easy because you are separating yourself from yourself. You see, it's an internal conflict. It's wanting to be this glorious, truest essence that is pure love, where you blossom and bloom and feel fantastic regardless of weather or money in the bank. And you identify yourself with this limited, defined person that is probably struggling a little bit. So you're separating yourself from what you really want to be through enforcing all these stories. Okay, so the fear of letting go requires a little bit of faith, a little bit of bravery, and comes in portions. So when we don't let that go, when we don't really open up for more, there's an internal function also called avidya. If you see the word video, to see things, avidya is the opposite, not seeing things as they are. We are then wearing, let's say, a pair of filtered glasses, a shaded kind, that sees the world and the experience that you're in this kind of separated state, where it's me and them, it's them against me, it's I relating to the person, it's I reacting to something, it's me feeling a lot of things. And then we act upon that through that, from that filter. We don't see things as it is, and we act from that place. We create action in the world, we create action within us, and this is karma. So this is our responses in the situations, this is the reactions. And this is the outcomes of our situations and reactions to it, and the experiences that we have. And this karma, these actions, create imprints, samsara. And these imprints are the karmic, energetic, unresolved knots that will attract the opposite, the polar opposite of that energetic knot. I'm not an expert in exactly what happens in energetics, but you can see it as that. This is like an energetic loop or knot that wants to fulfill itself by the reversal. So you will attract you will attract the same situation until you can resolve that in a different reaction. You can also see these imprints as tracks in an old record, a vinyl record. Those grooves that the needle runs through, you can see these imprints as those tracks, those grooves. So the needle in the next coming cycle, next time you get that same sensory input, you will probably perceive and sense it a similar way due to your filtered glasses. And the feeling and emotion that arises is really your opportunity. How will you react upon it? How will you treat it? How will you identify or not identify through that feeling? What will you do in, oh, what happened here? Oh, there's a missing piece there. So this is where it gets interesting. If you're not self-aware and you're not placing a little bit of focus and attention on your internal process, you will feel and react and react the same way. You will go through this cycle and just repeating the karmic pattern. But if you do want to work and resolve karma, there are opportunities here. There are opportunities in being, let's go through opportunities. There's opportunities in staying in sensation and prolong that moment before reacting to it, before judging it, before analyzing it, before becoming in relation to it. So becoming aware of just being present and open-minded, a little bit curious about the sensations that you have, and to stay in them, and to notice and observe what happens. What happens is you have to stand waiting for 40 minutes at the train tracks. What happens within you? Do you begin to distract yourself, avoid whatever arises, or take an opportunity to be present in the moment, observing yourself inwardly? And a good example, are you texting people to let them know how terrible it is that you always have to stand here waiting? So we often do this. We create stories about it, okay? Stories on me, myself, and I. This is terrible. I have to stand here every single day. I have to do. And this is bad. We judge it. We place negative incantation on it. And we reinforce these stories about how this is happening to me, how this is terrible, because I am by texting someone or calling someone or showing up on Facebook writing about how terrible it is, we reinforce that story about us. We reinforce the one that is suffering in that situation, because I promise you, your truest essence is not suffering in that situation. When you're connected to your truest essence, which is just this blissful presence, it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if you stand 40 minutes by the train tracks. So the one that is reacting is the ego self. It's the false identity that what happens here? It's the false identity that is reacting, that really actually kind of wants to be in pain also. And this is another point, that identification, that persona, that part of us needs to and wants to stay in existence. And when we begin to do this work, that ego self can become louder and stronger and react in strong ways just to make sure that I still exist and you bloody damn validate me now by reacting and feeling. So those triggered moments are opportunities. The triggered moments when we are triggered by the external circumstances, and because they say something about that story. They give us clues to karmic wounds that needs to be healed. They give us clues to inner child work that needs to be done. Let's say if we get triggered by a relationship, someone, a partner says something to us, or does something or doesn't do something that we want them to do, and we get triggered by that feeling. This is important. Feeling something, becoming angry, trigger, and then observe the story that goes on in your mind. You always do. You are not paying attention to me. I am feeling unloved right now, or whatever the story is. It says something about you in relationship to the person. So that story is a wonderful opportunity for a karmic cleanse. So that story, listen to it, see it, observe it, see how it makes you feel, see what that story is really about, because at first it seems to be about that other person. But when you turn around, look within, okay, it does say something about you too. So it may begin like, you never take out the trash, and I become so mad about it because it's important to me that it's clean and fresh, and you don't appreciate that. You don't respect me. Now it gets about, now we're sort of turning it so that external, for the first about them, is really about us. We don't feel appreciated and perhaps not even loved. And then that is the part that needs to be loved from you. We can also turn around to say that if, so in that story, we can, same example, you could feel that I really should take out the trash. I'm just not good at that. This is so, I want you to do it because otherwise I have to do it, and I don't do it because I'm not good at it, and I just don't. And then I feel like a failure. So that could be a turnaround to see what is really about that trigger, because we don't get triggered for nothing. We get triggered for something. And it's not about the other person. It's about something within us that doesn't feel loved. So in that situation, I would judge myself for not taking out trash enough in this everyday example. And I could see in meditation, I can go back and see that I have only ever been loved if I do the right things. This has been strong for me, feeling as a child only loved if I did the right things. I wasn't loved. I didn't feel loved unconditionally, making mistakes. And whatever is true for you in this introspection, it is not the same for everyone. But if you find a small child, an inner child, just not being loved for, not doing what you're supposed to do, then that's a karmic opportunity for healing. And it's beautiful. So it seems to be simple, everyday triggers. People are just not doing things well enough. But they could all just be related to inner work. It's just a flashlight. You know, direct at something else, but then just turn it back in and see what is really going on. What is really going on? So healing is, so healing that part of yourself can look different ways. And I'm going to go through that work more specifically in coming classes. But really it's about loving yourself, for feeling unloved. It's about loving yourself in all those little aspects. Like practically in that moment, sit and love yourself. We can also go into, past life work and regression and really look at the source. Where does this come from? But there's so much in our everyday lives and our childhood that reflects every karmic wound. Because in this life, we are repeating situations that allow us to expose these triggers, to expose these wounds for healing to occur. Sometimes we really need to get to the core to see what happened way back. What happened? I don't understand this. But in some cases, we don't need to understand that very cause, like being burned at stake or executed or something gross. We need to get to that feeling of not being loved, not being appreciated, not being seen, validated, and to give exactly what we were lacking, give that to ourselves. Yes, that was a long about stories, but I think that's really the essence of it. We could also see and practice this. I'm looking at the cycle, to practice that in our everyday life and not to become observant about our thoughts, about stories, about me, myself, and I, and then just begin to not make them. And when we have them and want to share them, not share them. Perfect to practice in lunchroom conversations when people tell you about their stuff, and instead of going in and tell them about your stuff relating to the same topic, like, I have a Volvo, well, I have a Volvo, my parents had a Volvo. Well, who cares? Sorry. If you listen to these conversations, it's so much about, I had this, I had that, I did this, I did that, I went to Crete in 1994, I did this, I did this. Whereas instead, or say, I was betrayed, well, I know someone that was betrayed. Instead, actually meeting that person where they are and listen and be present with them and their feelings. So I was betrayed. Oh my God, how does that make you feel? Just be present with them. I have a Volvo. Oh, wonderful, you have a Volvo. Yeah, but I wasn't almost, I couldn't almost afford it, but now it feels really good. And then, yeah, great, be with them in their happiness. And see how the conversation takes shape in a different way. It's like a flowing together in presence instead of, validating each other's false identities through each other. Okay. So fear of letting go. If we can let go of some of these stories, some of these urges to put in your point of view or your how you relate to that situation. So these stories come to expression in the opinions as well, having to have the last say, or have to have an opinion about everything. Well, I think this, I think that. Okay. So let go. One could. I'm not saying you are going to or should. This is just opportunities to let go of some of those stories, some of those cravings, inner urges to tell someone. It doesn't really matter who, but sometimes I just need to tell someone that I I actually cut my finger. I had to tell someone I cut my finger. I have this example from my life. I became very present with this happened, and now I have this urge. I really have an urge to tell someone why. I tried to let it be because I knew about this process, and I thought, let's try. The urge was so strong. I had to tell someone. It's not that telling would make any difference to the wound, my experience. But it was a story about what happened. It was really strong at that time. It may seem silly, but my ego tried really hard to stay in existence. And she's still there. She's still in existence, but I'm not dominated by her. She's my ally in love. And that's different. So when we begin to let go of these identifications and the stories, we can see things, turn this around. We can see things more as they are. We can see that the other person doesn't say anything that hurts you. It's about them. They say something and express something that is about them and their stories and their past hurts and their wounds and their karma. And you can look at it from a new perspective. You can see it as it is. It's not about you, perhaps, if they accuse you of something. It's about them. And you can be present in a totally different way. This is not about cutting away emotions. This is not about ignoring life, ignoring relationships, ignoring, bypassing experience. No, this is about just seeing things as they are with clear eyes. It's like taking off the pair of glasses. Just see. And then, of course, we act differently. We change and create other different karma. We add different action, different karma to the web of life. And we create other imprints that are more rooted in presence and love, unity, than in old karmic wounds and stories about suffering. Yeah, this is kind of it. There are so much beautiful potential in understanding and understanding this. And I find, like I said in the beginning, that that the mind kind of, for me, the mind needed to understand this to be able to relax and to be able to let these identifications go one by one, situation after situation. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? You can write in the chat if you have any kind of question. And if you need to go because it's lunchtime, yeah, I see someone's left, then you do so. Just slip out. But if there are any questions or comments on clarities, whatever, write in the chat box. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope this was of benefit. Thank you.